We're now under propositions and motions. I'm supposed to say, without objection, I recognize Senator Ginny Burdick.
Mr. President, I move that final consideration of SCR 206 be made a special order of business immediately.
Senator Ginny Burdick has moved that the final consideration of SCR 206 be made a special order of business immediately. To your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be an inspiring discussion, and I think we should get to it right away.
All those in favor of making SCR 206 special order of business, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed, no. This motion has carried. We will now proceed to the special order of business. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 206, Concurrent Resolution, whereas Private George Nathan Wright was born on September 19, 1945, and whereas Specialist 4 James Alfred Wright was born on January 14, 1948, and whereas the Wright brothers and their family resided in Boring, Oregon, and whereas Private George Nathan Wright was a United States Marine assigned to F Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Division, 3rd Marine Amphibious Force, and whereas Private George Nathan Wright was a 0311 rifleman, and whereas Private George Nathan Wright succumbed to hostile enemy fire in the Quang Tri province of South Vietnam on May 21, 1967 at the age of 21, and whereas Specialist 4 James Alfred Wright was a soldier in the United States Army assigned to B Battery, 6th Battalion, 11th Artillery, 11th Infantry Brigade, Americal Division, and whereas Specialist 4 James Alfred Wright was a 13E40 cannon fire direction specialist, and whereas Specialist 4 James Alfred Wright succumbed to hostile enemy fire in Quang Tri province, South Vietnam on May 31, 1969 at the age of 21, and whereas the Wright family of Boring, Oregon is one of only 41 families nationwide to lose 2 sons in the Vietnam War, and whereas the father of the Wright brothers, George Wright, is a United States Navy World War II veteran, and whereas the community of Boring and the Vietnam Veterans of America wish to honor the sacrifice of the Wright family in the Vietnam War, now, therefore, be it resolved by the Legislative Assembly of the State of Oregon that we, the members of the 78th Legislative Assembly, recognize and honor Private George Nathan Wright and Specialist 4 James Alfred Wright for their service to their country.
I'll now recognize Senator Alan Olson, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, the decade of the 60s and early 70s were tumultuous times in America. We were at war in a country that most people had never heard of, Vietnam. As with most wars, this one also was not popular with Americans, but yet our young men and women went without question to fight battles that most of us in the United States never heard of. We are here today to honor those heroes who gave their all for their country. There's a small community in my Senate district called Boring. Now, it's really not boring, and I'm going to interject here. It's really not boring. It's a great little community. It's very, very tight-knit. They have a wonderful strawberry fest. They do a lot of really neat things. And they're out there by Sandy. If anybody doesn't know where Boring is, they're out there by Sandy. Very great community. In this community, there's a gentleman who has suffered the consequences and sacrifices of war. His name is Mr. George Wright. I'm honored to have him sitting with me here today. He is a World War II veteran, so he served America. You see, Mr. Wright had 2 sons. One was his namesake, George Nathan Wright. Young George was a Marine rifleman assigned to F Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Division, 3rd Marine Amphibious Force. On May 21st, 1967, young George, only 21 at the time, came under hostile enemy fire in the Quang Tri province, South Vietnam. In this firefight, he was mortally wounded. That day, Senior Wright became a Gold Star family, which recognizes families that have lost members in war. Mr. Wright's other son was James Alfred Wright. When I filled this out, it was easier to type it out than it was to read it. He was a Specialist 4 in the Army. In other words, he was a corporal with an MOS of 13E40, a cannon fire direction specialist. He was assigned to B Battery, 6th Battalion, 11th Artillery, 11th Infantry Brigade of the Americal Division. On May 31st, 1969, James was mortally wounded by hostile enemy fire in the Quang Nai province of South Vietnam. The Wright family was now a 2 Gold Star family, and they are only one of 41 families across the nation to lose 2 sons in the Vietnam War. The community of Boring and the Vietnam Veterans of America wish to honor the sacrifice of the Wright family in the Vietnam War. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Legislative Assembly of the State of Oregon that we, the members of the 78th Legislative Assembly, recognize and honor Private George Nathan Wright and Specialist 4 James Alfred Wright for their service to Oregon and to their country.
Recognize Senator Loy Munnis Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very honored to talk to you. Senator Olson, you made it hard for me. I'm very honored to speak to Senate Concurrent Resolution 206. George and Jim were classmates of mine. George graduated from Gresham High in 1968, right when I did also. The Wright family was very much like my family. I mean, we were a farming community at that time, but we were growing. The Wright family had 2 boys and 2 girls in it. George and Jim were brothers, and then Sherry and his sister. My family, 2 boys and 2 girls. And the thought of losing my 2 brothers is not easy to even contemplate. I can't even contemplate what Sherry, who's sitting at my desk, and Mr. Wright, sitting with Senator Olson, went through. I liked George. I didn't know Jim very well. George was on the varsity baseball team, and I was honored enough to be their scorekeeper. And I don't know if you've ever seen a baseball scorekeeper, but you have to keep track of the RBIs and the hits and the balls and the flies, and so I got to know those guys because they wanted to make sure that I wrote down the correct stats into that scorebook. But I was able to go to all of those games, and that's how I got to know George. I had a few classes with him, and also a couple of activities, after-school activities with him. He was a great person, and Jim was a great person. And it saddens me tremendously that he and his brother did not come back to Gresham alive. I really can't fathom the loss that the Wright family experienced in the late 1960s when 2 brothers died at such a young age. Only 41 families in the U.S. have lost more than 1 member in that Vietnam War. And Mr. Wright, who is, I believe, 91, we want to honor them today. Vietnam veterans rarely talk about their personal experiences. I was honored to fly in and out of Vietnam in 1969 and 1970, picking up the GIs and flying them to the R&Rs in Guam, Honolulu, and Tokyo. They would talk about the people of Vietnam, but not the battles themselves. They talk about the long flight. There's nothing but blue. I don't know if you've ever flown over the Pacific Ocean, but there's nothing but blue. The veterans might mention the first blasts of humidity when getting off the plane. They might talk about the creeping crud and the dysentery that they experienced. And they might talk about the beauty of the countryside from the air, or their first Vietnamese meal. But I find that they don't talk about the battles and the deaths of their comrades. Mr. Wright, and Sherry, it's with great pride that this legislature bestows the highest honor and recognition of what your brother and your son sacrificed for this great, great nation. Our Vietnam veterans and these two brothers, George and Jim Wright, were my friends, and they were trying to preserve our freedom. They died in this Vietnam conflict. Actually, 6 of my classmates at Gresham High died in that conflict. They all served our nation with honor. So let us remember these two brothers' service to our nation. We all value freedom and peace, not only for ourselves, but for all people. Thank you, Mr. President.
I don't mean to, Senator Colonel Brian Boquist, do you wish to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. President. I hadn't planned to speak because, as you know, Mr. President, I don't like to talk about these things because I've been there. But the one thing I do want to make mention to not only the Wright family, and I'm actually looking down at the floor here in front of me, Mr. President, and there's a bag on my floor here with a beret on it. And it says, Vietnam Veterans of America. And I was alive during the Vietnam War. I actually joined at the end of the Vietnam War and went on from there, like many members. And that era meant you never wore a uniform, because the public didn't see the sacrifices. And this body and our colleagues in the House, at least for the recent decade, have tried to recognize those sacrifices of those Vietnam veterans, though it be nearly 4 decades later. And my heart goes out to you. My heart goes out to all you Vietnam veterans and to all of the Wrights. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Wilson, closing remarks?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Question now rises on third reading and final passage of SCR 206. Those attending the measure shall pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Monroe? Olson? Brzezinski? Riley? Roblin? Rosenbaum? Shields? Steiner Hayward? Thatcher? Thompson? Whitsett? Winters? Bearchiger? Bates? Byer? Boquist? Burdick? Dembro? Devlin? Edwards? Ferrioli? Gelser? Girard? Hansel? Hass? Johnson? Knope? Cruz? Moss Anderson? President Courtney?
Yes.
Excused, Przonski, Winters, 28 aye votes.
SCR 206, having received a constitutional majority, is declared pass. Well, I'm all messed up now. I remember this measure being taken up in the Veterans Committee, and Senator Olson spoke to it, and then Lawyer Monasanich spoke to it. And I remember thinking, where is the poor father? Where is he? I have 3 sons. I don't like to talk about with anyone the loss of their children. I get all messed up. And lo and behold, there he is. There he is. He is on our floor. 92 years old. And to be sure, the sister of the brothers, there she is. And, you know, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Colonel. You're my colonel, whether you know it or not, or like it or not, Senator Brian Boquist, but I didn't mean, because you didn't have your light on. And I know what happens to you, but I did what I did, because you are our leader in these areas. I don't know, nothing, we have a resolution that we passed. You heard the remarks, but it's not enough. It's not enough to say what we're feeling about you and your sons. It's just not, your brother, it's not. But we're trying as hard as we can to let you know that what they did and what you're experiencing has got to us. It really has got to us. And I just hope today, I don't know, I just hope you can smile sometime today or in your heart to know how proud we are that you and your family and your loved ones are Oregonians, and that you're a part of what we are, because it is unimaginable, your sacrifice, and you've made it. Not once, but twice. I cannot comprehend this. So I'm stumbling around up here trying to say something profound, because that's what presiding officers are supposed to do. But I'm not very good at this in this moment. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope today you'll say it was a good day, because we sure tried as hard as we could in the Oregon State Senate to make it happen. And I got to say something else. I've been agonizing over today. You know what? I'm not agonizing anything after this, because this is the ultimate statement about life. Loved ones, family, pain and suffering, and happiness. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Senator Olson. I'm sorry. You were strong in the committee. You were very strong. I'm sorry. I know it was tough. Lori was having struggle. Senator Boquist, I know. So thank you, and thank you, the Wrights, and everything you've done. So I hope it's a good day for you. Now we go on to the everyday life of the Senate. So it seems pretty, whatever. Great. Some of you get a chance to say hello to Mr. Wright and the sisters. We want a special moment to allow Mr. Wright to leave our chambers. And the sister, his daughter.